Hi viewers, L hope you are fine and L request for you like this video and subscribe this channel. The night my father told me I had to give up my university seat for my younger brother, something inside me quietly broke. I still remember the sound of rain hitting the kitchen window while my mother avoided looking at me. My acceptance letter sat on the table beside me, slightly folded from how many times I had opened it that week. It was the happiest thing I had ever held in my hands. I had earned that scholarship. Every sleepless night, every extra shift at the bookstore, every moment I spent studying while my friends lived normal teenage lives, it had finally paid off. But in my family, my achievements were never really mine. Because everything always belonged to Daniel. My younger brother was what my mother called special. Not because he was sick. Not because he struggled, but because he was the favorite. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. When Daniel failed his classes, my parents blamed the teachers. When he crashed my father's car, they blamed stress. When he emptied my savings account 2 years earlier, by accident, they told me family should forgive family. And I did, again and again, until that rainy night. We can't afford both futures, my father said quietly, his hands wrapped around a coffee mug. Daniel needs another chance. I stared at him, unable to breathe properly. Another chance. Daniel had already dropped out of 2 colleges. He spent most nights partying with friends while I worked double shifts to help pay bills. I earned this, I whispered. My mother finally looked at me then, her eyes cold in a way I had never seen before. And your brother needs us more. That sentence shattered something permanent inside me. Not because they chose him, but because they expected me to disappear quietly while they did it. I looked around the kitchen that night, the tiny apartment, the cracked ceiling, the family photos where Daniel always stood in the center while I smiled somewhere in the background. And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. I had spent my whole life begging people to love me equally. But they never would. That night, nobody noticed when I stopped crying. Nobody noticed when I folded my acceptance letter and slipped it into my bag. And nobody noticed when I quietly made the most important decision of my life. Because by morning, I was gone. I left before sunrise with 1 suitcase, $300, and no real plan. The bus station smelled like coffee and wet concrete. I remember sitting there alone, watching families hug each other goodbye while I tried not to fall apart completely. Part of me kept waiting for my phone to ring. For my mother to say she made a mistake. For my father to tell me to come home. But hours passed. Nothing. That silence hurt more than the betrayal itself. I moved to another city and rented the smallest room I could find above an old bakery. The walls were thin, the heater barely worked, and some nights I cried myself to sleep from exhaustion. But for the first time in my life, nobody could take my future away from me. I worked mornings at a cafe and studied at night. Some days I survived on instant noodles just to save enough money for textbooks. And slowly, painfully, my life started becoming mine. Until one evening, everything changed again. I was leaving work when I saw Daniel standing outside the cafe. For a second, I genuinely thought I was imagining him. He looked different, tired, nervous, smaller somehow. You disappeared, he said softly. I laughed before I could stop myself. Funny, none of you noticed. He lowered his eyes. That was the first time in years I had ever seen guilt on my brother's face. We sat in silence at a nearby bench while cold wind swept through the street. Then he finally told me the truth. After I left, my parents gave Daniel everything. My tuition fund, my savings, even money borrowed from relatives. And he lost it all. Within months, he dropped out again. The business idea my father invested in failed completely. Debt started swallowing my parents whole. The golden child had destroyed the family anyway. But they need help now, Daniel whispered. I stared at him in disbelief. Even after everything, they still sent him to ask me for something. That was the moment I realized my family hadn't changed at all. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could give them. I can't save them, I said quietly. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Mom cries every night. For a moment, guilt crawled into my chest. Because despite everything, they were still my family. But then I remembered all the nights I cried alone while they protected him. I remembered sacrificing pieces of myself just to keep peace inside that house. And I finally understood something important. Love should never require self-destruction. I hope they'll be okay, I told him honestly. But I'm not coming back. Daniel nodded slowly like he already knew. Before leaving, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was my old acceptance letter. Carefully unfolded, Protected all this time. I should have defended you, he whispered. Then he walked away, and for the first time in years, I stopped blaming only him. Because golden children are created by parents who choose favoritism over fairness. Daniel wasn't innocent, but he was also raised inside the same broken house that shattered me. Still, that didn't mean I had to return to it. 3 years later, I stood on a stage wearing my graduation gown while hundreds of people applauded around me. And for the first time in my life, I felt proud without needing anyone's approval. I had graduated with honors. The girl they thought was disposable had built a future completely on her own. After the ceremony, I checked my phone and froze. A message from my mother. "Can we see you?" I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. Part of me wanted to ignore it forever. But another part of me needed closure. So a week later, I met them at a small restaurant near campus. The moment I saw my parents walk inside, I barely recognized them. My father looked older, tired. My mother no longer carried that same cold confidence she once had. And Daniel, he looked genuinely happy to see me. Dinner was painfully awkward at first. Then finally, my mother started crying. Real crying, not the dramatic kind she used to weaponize when she wanted sympathy. "I failed you," she whispered. Hearing those words should have healed me instantly. But pain doesn't disappear just because someone apologizes late. I spent years believing I wasn't enough, I admitted quietly. Because no matter what I achieved, you always chose him. My father lowered his head. "We thought you were stronger," he said. That sentence almost made me laugh. People always expect the strongest child to survive the most pain. But nobody asks how much damage strength actually costs. Daniel spoke next. "She shouldn't have carried all of us." Silence filled the table, and for once, nobody argued with him. That dinner changed something inside me. Not because everything magically became perfect, but because I finally understood this wasn't my fault. Their favoritism was their failure, not my weakness. I didn't move back home. I didn't suddenly become one big happy family again. Some wounds heal slowly, some relationships never fully recover. But I stopped carrying hatred everywhere I went, because hatred keeps you emotionally tied to the people who hurt you. And I was finally ready to be free. Today, I live in a small apartment with sunlight pouring through the windows every morning. I work at the publishing company I once dreamed about joining. And sometimes, when life becomes quiet, I think about that rainy night in the kitchen. The night my family stole my future for their golden child. What they never realized was, they didn't destroy my future. They forced me to build one without them. And honestly, that became the greatest gift they ever gave me.